boiling the kettle black?
Eh?
You're just as lazy as I am. That's what attracted us to each other in the first place. I just didn't know we were ready to go public about
I
it.
hardly said anything.
When I get into a show, game, movie, or whatever, I don't typically make a video on it right away. I let it sit for a while, and if the passion is still there, I know I could easily share my thoughts in video form. I did it with Blastcore, Wander Over Yonder, and now I'm doing it with a little series called Bob and Margaret. The show follows, you guessed it, Bob and Margaret, an English couple in their late 30s, early 40s going through the hurdles of everyday life. Work, neighbors, the possibility of having children, their own mortality, stuff like that. The show was created by husband and wife duo David Fine and Alison Snowden. Fine was from Toronto, Snowden from the UK, and they've left quite a mark on the animation scene, with this show being one of their most recognized works. Even back when I was too young to watch it, I was aware of it, and those with even a passing knowledge hear the name and go, "Oh yeah, that show." In my experience, most folks pinpoint to how the characters' noses were drawn. It's immediately apparent with them being big old circles, and I always thought they looked like the Pokemon Diglett if they sprouted limbs and walked upright, especially in the pilot. Characters do the no mouth thing when they're not talking, making the resemblance uncanny and maybe even a bit unsettling. But in case you've only ever heard the title Bob and Margaret from an adult novel in Dragon Ball, allow me to give you a little history lesson. The show is based on the 1993 short film Bob's Birthday, which has Bob go through a midlife crisis as he turns 40 while Margaret plans him a surprise party. She's got a bunch of friends in the house who all hide and are ready to surprise Bob before he goes on about where his life's gone, leaving Margaret no chance to give the signal. It starts getting awkward when a now pantsless Bob says all their friends are boring and he doesn't really like them, as they're all listening in, and Margaret just goes upstairs in a huff. After some time to reflect and make up, Bob goes into the car thinking they have dinner plans. And Margaret, well, she takes the birthday cake, turns out the lights, and leaves the guests hiding. If you ever did that in real life, expect half your stuff to be stolen or broken when you get back, just saying. People really liked this short for being relatable in a way that was funny and not pretentious, going so far as to win the Oscar for Best Animated Short in '95. And if you were in the States watching late 90s Cartoon Network, you may have seen this on the anthology series Oh Canada, which aired shorts mainly from Canada's National Film Board, or NFB. This didn't air in Canada proper, but it didn't need to. When I was 5, I swear I saw that Black Fly short every other day. This show aired late at night in the time before Adult Swim existed, which allowed for more of the content these shorts offered, but not everything. The scene where Bob's going commando is censored with a little maple leaf that was even in this promo. Very classy for TVY7. After nabbing the Oscar, people all over were ringing up Snowden and Fine for show opportunities. One of those parties was Universal Pictures, but the two declined the offer as Universal was concerned about the show being too British. They wanted Bob and Margaret to move to the States or have American friends, but that's when Canadian juggernaut Nelvana swooped in. They paid for 75% of the show's budget, with the UK's Channel 4 supplying the rest, the latter helping produce Bob's Birthday. One article I found says season 1's budget was $11.1 million, but another claims each episode cost $440,000, but they both agree on Nelvana forking over the most cash. The studio has made their name in children's properties, but this was their first ever cartoon for adults, and their first adult-themed production since the 1983 film Rockin' Rule. You might have seen my previous videos on Canadian TV, and I've had ideas for a follow-up for some time now. This show was on a potential list, but I decided to make a whole video on it cause no one else has. And for as British as it is, I can get away with calling it Canadian. We share so much with the UK anyway, we're like brothers. We both say Zed. I've seen my fair share of Coronation Street and Great British Bake Off on CBC. I know what Brilliant Creatures is, for goodness sakes. I'm more than qualified. But no lie, most of the production was done at Nelvana's Toronto studio. We got folks who worked on Clone High, The Magic School Bus, Tales from the Crypt Keeper. The character design supervisor was Todd Kaufman, who'd later be known for his work on 16, Total Drama, and creating the show's Sidekick and Garage Band, among others. Bob and Margaret's sound editor, Ryan Araki, also did audio work for the Bob's Burgers movie, another thing with Canadian talent under its belt, and Bob in its name. As for the writing and voice voice acting, that was mainly done in the UK. Snowden and Fine reviewed storyboards, did voice direction, wrote scripts, and so on from their own quarters in London and Toronto, when they weren't at Nelvana. Most characters were voiced by London actors, though there were a few voices from Toronto in here too, namely in season 1. Bob was voiced by Andy Hamilton and Margaret by Alison Snowden. They were picked for the short film, having little acting experience, which resulted in a more natural way of talking, though, fun fact, Snowden wasn't the first choice for Margaret. One of the short's cast members, Harry Enfield, brought on a friend named Helen Fielding, who was the first to try for Margaret. Even though that didn't work out, she ended up becoming the author of Bridget Jones' Diary, which I think is a big deal, so I'm sure she's fine. And for someone who didn't do much acting before, you can't even tell with how well Snowden plays her.
You're going to stage an appeal. We'll get a lawyer to help you. And I promise to stop treating animals for free.
Really?
Except for emergencies. And little puppies. Oh, Bob, they're so sweet.
She brings Margaret to life in such a unique way, and everything about her is so charming and cute, which makes things a delight when she's upset or out of her comfort zone.
We're having another big dinner party on the 12th. Why don't you two go bowling? I'm not Bob's chattel, so stop treating me like a pathetic, useless idiot! Oh, shut up with all your fancy jargon!
And if you're wondering if David Fine did any voices, yes, he did! An incomprehensible pizza guy in the second episode.
What? What? What?
For Canadian voices, episode 11 features Bob's Canadian cousins Cookie and Melvin, voiced by Jane Eastwood and Wayne Robson respectively. If you didn't know, these two are legends in the Canadian acting world, being in just about everything Toronto threw their way. If you're as big a fan of the Red Green Show as I am, Melvin's voice should sound very familiar.
Oh my God, we had a pizza for lunch already? It was so horrible, all dry and flat like some kind of cheese cookie?
I did not steal this speaker. I just had to leave in a hurry and I forgot it was still stuck in the window. Honest.
What was the big rush?
Well, the car's owner came back from the snack bar.
Yep, that's Mike Hammer, ex-con with a heart of gold. Always was my favorite in that crew. The rest of the cast does a great job, and each recurring character is distinct and memorable. There's a pair of burglars named Beanie and Boney, guess which one's which, and I always loved seeing them. It's all but confirmed they're in a relationship, and man, they're so supportive, doing what they can to make each other happy, and even if they rob you blind, they're still decent people. Honestly, they might have a better thing going than Bob and Margaret. Anyways, when the show debuted in June 1998, it made its US home on Comedy Central, Channel 4 in the UK, and in Canada on Global TV. However, the first place I saw it was on the Channel of Kings, YTV. It debuted there in September 05 and had a healthy rerun life. This old schedule showed it aired weeknights at 10:30, following My Family, one of many Britcoms the channel used to air, and right after you were hit with Inuyasha and Bionics reruns. What a time to be alive. The show even got lobbed in with some of the channel's themed events like YTV's Movie Month, and fans on the show's talk page had such rave things to say about it like, "This show is great, I love it, it rocks my socks right down to my toes." Smiley face. Thank you for that, Danny3698. Fellow YTV fan and good friend Microphone recalls an interesting story when the channel aired the 6th episode, The Holiday. Without giving too much away, this one takes place on a plane and things go wrong on that plane. As the story goes, YTV aired this on the 4th anniversary of the September 11 attacks by pure happenstance, and needless to say, it was skipped in future reruns. Oops. I only ever saw one episode on YTV, the aforementioned 11th episode, during a weekend at my grandparents'. I also remember seeing one of YTV's Coming Up Next graphics for the show, but that hasn't cropped up online yet. It wasn't until fall 2021 I gave it a proper watch, when YouTube channel Retro Reruns started posting episodes earlier that May. Content-wise, I figured it would be on the level of a Simpsons or a Futurama, but then you remember, Canada and the UK, we're known for doing stuff you'd never see in a US cartoon. And the fact it aired on Comedy Central also says something too, I guess. It's mostly pretty tame, but it has no problem surprising you. There was a point I was watching this and Soul Eater for a couple days, and Bob and Margaret took the trophy trophy for the "I really hope no one comes into the room" moment that night. Aside from some uncensored nudity, there's some pretty dark humor and naughty jokes that left me speechless right out the gate. And while typically light on profanities, there's a single case of an uncensored F-bomb. It's only ever used once, and combined with how it's used, it legit shocked me. Can't recall the last time that happened. All this, and yet it still gets marked as kid-friendly in some official places. Obviously, they didn't see the holiday episode. That'll make them think twice about lobbing this in with Peppa Pig. Oh, speaking of, the show's creators have a daughter, Lily Snowden Fine, who was part of the cast, though she was only a baby at the time. But I kid you not, she was the very first voice of Peppa Pig, and Bob and Margaret's actors were also on that show, with Snowden even writing a few episodes. It's surreal to think about, especially since I watched a bit of Peppa back in 2004 before America caught on like a decade later. I did say this show focused on mundane situations, but that doesn't mean it's dull or boring. Everything they go through in the first 2 seasons, I guarantee you'll find something to relate to. There's stuff that'll make you laugh, cry, feel uncomfortable, stuff that'll really hit you at your core, and it all comes from real experiences. I forgot to mention Bob's job as a dentist, and the reason behind that is cause Snowden has horrible childhood memories of them. Seriously, some of the show's most violent moments are in his office, and a fair bit made my skin crawl. Now, tons of shows tackle the slice of life angle, but Bob and Margaret's hurdles hit home for me, whether I could relate to something or just felt sympathetic. A recurring theme is whether or not they should start a family, which is explored in episode 2. Here, they think about the long-term benefits to children, and later sit down with some friends who just had a baby. They're good people, they love their kid, but they are exhausted. They talk about all the hardships that come with the job, past, present, and future, and 5 minutes into dinner, Margaret's passed out on the floor, basically saying, yeah, this ain't for me. For something even more relatable, I think back to this past June. My brother and I watched the episode with Bob's cousins one night, and the next day, cousins we hadn't seen in years showed up out of the blue. In our case, it was a much nicer surprise, but we had a good laugh about that. David Fine noted another way the show mirrored real life, that being, nobody benefits from any gained wisdom. He said, people make mistakes, and they learn from them, and then they make the mistakes again. People don't tend to change. They don't suddenly understand what they're doing wrong in their life and then become different personalities. And while there certainly have been people who have done so, there's just as many who don't. Like, someone knows they have to lose weight, they lose that weight, and then gain it back and go, ah crap, I'm back right where I started. They tackle this angle in the 3rd episode. Margaret throws out her back, and her chiropractor's sick of telling her to stay in shape. She and Bob do all they can to get fit despite how much they hate it, make alright progress, but by the end, Margaret goes down to reach for something and... Cut to black as we hear that chiropractor prattle on again, but that's just one part of this episode. We're also introduced to Kathy and her boyfriend Ken, with Kathy being very brash and controlling. She also learns a lesson by the end, but she certainly doesn't change. Next time you see her, it's like nothing happened. Which leads me to how the cast operates. The writers thought about the characters' personalities and would go, would Bob do or say something like this? I don't know. But then they later go, well, people contradict themselves all the time. Bob can do a lot more than we think. And when you watch the show, that couldn't be more true. Sometimes Bob stands up for himself or has his wife's back, and other times, he doesn't. They talk about being honest and never keeping secrets, but that's also not consistent. One secret gets so out of hand it almost gets Margaret killed, but Bob had good intentions trying to hide it. And that's one thing that never falters, how much they care about each other. There's times when one of them does something the other can't believe, times where they're so upset they don't want to speak to each other, but there's a love and dependency that's unwavering. If they didn't have each other, they'd be completely lost, and it makes for some of the most heartfelt moments in the show. In my everlasting search for husband-wife animated sitcoms, I think I've found my favorite, and it was right under my nose this whole time.
Gosh, my nose looks so big.
Now, given the amount of Bob and Margaret retrospectives I've seen on YouTube, i.e. none, you might think it was a modest hit at best, but no man, this show was big in its heyday. It did gangbusters in the UK, but it's one of the few examples of Canadian animation, especially for adults, that had immense popularity and exposure in America. When it debuted on Comedy Central, its ratings were second only to South Park, and back in Canada, it was one of the highest rated shows ever, the #1 Canadian show on Global, and, quote, the 12th highest rated show in the context of all TV series of any kind. Like, what? It was such a hit, it managed to get 4 seasons during its runtime, 52 full episodes. But there is a catch. After season 2, the show got a bit of a shakeup, with Bob and Margaret moving to Toronto as 2 displaced Brits in a new world. So basically what they were afraid of happening to the show happened anyway, just a little further up north. This batch of 26 episodes aired in America on Showtime, well after it already finished its run on Global. But how did it all come to this, I hear you say? Well, it was a result of the show getting more and more Canadian. Channel 4 dipped after season 1, and Canada was putting more money into the show. Eventually, CanCon rules said the show had to tell stories in the country itself. And while a lot of the Canuck crew stayed on board, everyone across the pond was cut off, namely writers and voice actors. Tom McGillis, co-creator of 16 and Total Drama, went from line producer to full-on producer, and Snowden and Fine served as consultants, but took much more of a backseat here. One of the leads also had to be Canadian, and while Snowden still voiced Margaret, Bob was instead voiced by actor Brian George, and if you don't know who this guy is, here's a quick rundown. He was born in Israel to parents of Lebanese and Indian backgrounds, raised in London, moved to Toronto, then went to LA where he's had a prolific career since. He's had a bunch of roles in sitcoms, most notably Babu in Seinfeld, and for VO, there's Batman, SpongeBob, Simpsons, Cowboy Bebop, Steven Universe, Avatar, Sly 4 even? He is one of my favorite actors ever, and with a name and background like his, the planets couldn't have aligned better. He did Bob's lines from LA while Margaret's were done in London and the rest were done in Toronto, making this show bi-continental, bi-coastal, and according to McGillis, very expensive. They also got rid of the line boil on the characters. It was on and off in season 2, but it's gone for good now, and I kinda miss it. Now when a show gets a shakeup like this, you always get detractors and defenders on both sides, but for me, I'm somewhere in the middle. I wouldn't dismiss the Toronto seasons entirely. They still have a bit of charm, and there's a couple bright spots, but I don't think they're quite as good as the first 2 seasons. Now, if some of you still have Cartoon Network on the brain, you might say, oh, kinda like Dexter's Lab? To which I reply, no, I'll defend a lot of what those seasons did. Half of you doing your best Mandark laugh don't even know it came from that batch, but I'm getting off topic here. I'd compare Bob and Margaret to the first 2 Ninja Turtles movies. Yeah, go figure. Secret of the Ooze doesn't reach the same heights as the original, but to say it's bad is a bit harsh. There's definitely stuff to like here, but if you don't watch it, you ain't missing anything crazy. Either way, it's certainly no Ninja Turtles 3, oh my goodness. So what kept me watching the later seasons? Well, I liked a lot of the side characters, like their new neighbors, Trevor and Joyce. These guys are loud, pushy, and crude, but they're good people, all too ready to help till it hurts. Margaret also strikes a friendship with the girls at her workplace, and they genuinely enjoy her company and help her out with stuff. She never had anything like that in London. It was either Bob or, well, sometimes not even Bob. And with all the new faces, you get a showcase of top-class Toronto talent. Just to name a few, there's Terry Hawks, best known as Sailor Moon.
Yeah, why don't we say what's on our minds instead of quoting all these middle-class knee-jerk cliches?
Christian Potenza, Jude from 16.
It's so cool to meet you. It's so cool.
Mark Daly, best known from City TV and Rokusho in Metabots.
Live from the streets of our Toronto. There's always time to speak your mind from Speaker's Corner. This is City TV everywhere.
And even Harvey Atkin, who a lot of people remember as King Koopa in all the old Mario cartoons.
Bob, what are you doing this weekend? You're coming up north to my cottage. I'd love to get to know you better. That dino twerp is eating me out of house and home.
As a kid, I remember hearing him as the announcer for Leon's commercials. Then when watching shows like Jacob Tutu and Ruby Gloom, it was one of the first times I remember going, hey, I know that voice. He's also in Goosebumps as a man named...
Hey, Mr. Malik.
Hey, what's new, Magoo?
Mr. Malik? Hey, that's me! Close enough. We also get to hear more of Cookie and Melvin, and even Bob's new voice grew on me. I still prefer Andy Hamilton, but Brian George gets what makes Bob tick. He also voices a side character, and when he and Bob interact, you'd never know they were the same guy.
You see, Gary, we have these cards printed up in batches of 500.
We used to order them in batches of 200, but we went through them too quickly.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
And I reckon only 2 people will get this, but it will always bring me joy knowing he voiced the Pizzaville guy in the chain's radio ads. His Bob voice is just a more nasally version of that.
Call
Pizzaville at 736-3636, not 736-3636. For the writing, where the UK seasons had a lot of 8s and 9s in my opinion, these ones average around 6.5 to 6.8, and sometimes you get a few 7s. I've seen shows just fall apart after a staff change, but this one got off alright. And if you compare it to most other Canadian adult animation, it still beats out a lot by a country mile quality-wise. Take it from me, I've seen a lot of it. Season 4 was an improvement from Season 3, and as it got to the end, it really started to figure things out. David Fine even co-wrote one episode and did another one solo, being the series finale, and they feel more in line with the UK seasons. All in all, it ends on a nice note, and I'm glad I watched them. Now, if I've convinced you to give it a watch, you have a few ways to do so. There is Retro Rerun, but what really irks me about that channel is how they cut out the credits, and that's part of the show for me. If not to see who worked on the darn thing, it gives me time to reflect on what I saw instead of going, alright, on to the next thing, let's move it along. There's also TV rips from the UK on YouTube, which have been up since 2012, and while it's kinda cool, they're not the best quality and some jokes are cut for censorship, F-bombs notwithstanding. Season 1 was released through a few VHS tapes and the first 2 seasons are on DVD, but they're out of print and can fetch a high price on auction sites. The easiest way to buy it is through iTunes or Apple TV, whatever you want to call it. Each season is only $8 and it's good quality and uncut. Honestly, a great deal. Season 1's credits come in like 5 seconds later than they should, but that's just me being observant. This is also the first time I've ever bought a show on iTunes, so I have Bob and Margaret to thank for that too. After Bob and Margaret, Snowden and Fine worked on many more projects. In 2007, they created Ricky Sprocket's Showbiz Boy for Nickelodeon and Teletoon. I never watched it, but I remember it being on, and it seems to have done alright for itself. Alongside some of the creative minds at Aardman, they developed the series Shaun the Sheep, which is a personal favorite, and created the character Timmy. I'm sure you've seen that gif of the sheep giving the thumbs up on social media. That's him, and he got his own show too. And in 2018, the duo released Animal Behavior, their first short film since Bob's birthday, which has won several awards, got nominated for an Oscar, and hey, even their daughter did some work on it too. She's her own accomplished artist too, by the way. You can find out more about the duo on their website, snowdenfine.com, which was an invaluable tool for this video. And you know, I sent them an email as I was making this, and David Fine was nice enough to answer some questions I had about Bob and Margaret. So here for you now is a little interview with words from the creators. Fair warning, there's a few episode spoilers ahead. Anything the broadcasters wouldn't let you guys do, you got away with nudity, violence, and one use of an F-bomb, English and French. Any bits that got blowback from networks after they aired? At first, they didn't want nudity or risque stuff, but then they realized it could work to make it more edgy, and so they were fine with it. There was really nothing much that we wanted to do which we had any issues from the broadcasters. Season 1 had a Toronto UK cast, but Season 2 solely used UK-based actors, I think. Was there a reason behind that? Actually, Season 1 and 2 were all UK cast, apart from one episode when Canadian relatives visit. Season 3 and 4 had Bob and Margaret move to Canada. This was driven mostly by the fact that to get funding, storylines had to be based in Canada, but we thought it was a fun idea too. Do you have a list of who voiced whom? The credits never specify. I do. It used to be on our website. If you want to know any, I can let you know, at least for Season 1 and 2. Any stories/topics you wanted to cover with future seasons? Haven't really thought of it. Personal favorite/least favorite episodes, or ones you think could have been done better for any reason? We both really like the Halloween episode because it touches on a lot of issues about life and death. I also really like an episode from Season 2 called Going Dutch. Alison wrote The Holiday about Bob and Margaret leaving their dogs at a bizarre kennel and then going to Greece on a plane which gets hijacked. I really liked that episode because it goes so against type for Alison to have written it, but it isn't seen so often now as it was written pre-9/11 and jokes about religious fundamentalists hijacking planes is not so cool right now. It was a nun in this episode. When you say Bob and Margaret was the #1 Canadian show on Global, do you mean in the history of Canadian TV up to that point, or just global? In all Canadian TV ever at that time, no Canadian-made animated show had ever been a primetime #1 show. With the Canada seasons, was it true one of the leads had to be Canadian by law? And did you have any say on who voiced Bob going forward? We did have input. Yes, there were CanCon rules. The original Bob was not available to do season 3 and 4, and another actress was going to do Margaret, but then Alison decided to do it. We had both been really burned out, and so she didn't feel up to it, but then decided it would be good to do. Overall thoughts on the Canada seasons. What did you think was missing from them? I thought they were okay. A lot of really talented people worked hard on them, and we liked some things about them, but the stories weren't as personal to us as the earlier ones, so they didn't resonate to us the same way. Many thought they were good, which is great to know. For David Fine, you wrote 2 episodes in season 4. How did that come about, and what was it like writing for the new characters, etc.? I had always wanted to do a Christmas episode and a camping episode, and so I offered to write them. Apart from that, we had a lot less to do with season 3 and 4. Part of the reason was that they needed to make them faster, and we felt that we could not be immersed in the show and deliver them that fast, so we left it to others and consulted, reviewing story ideas and giving input. It was a very interesting experience. At first, some of the ideas and direction of the show concerned us, but then they got in David Cole, a really clever story editor who made a huge difference, and so there were some really good ideas, and the series in Canada worked out a lot better than we feared it might. And finally, if someone approached you and said, "We'd like to do more Bob and Margaret," would you come back to it today, or has that ship sailed? Any modern day topics you'd want to tackle? If yes, it's crossed my mind. I wouldn't say absolutely not, but it's not a priority. I think there are many new things to inspire stories, but I can't say I have any in mind just now. I do occasionally have experiences which make me think, that would have been a Bob and Margaret story. Well, there you have it. I think this is the penultimate video on Bob and Margaret. I'm not one to toot my own horn, but you'd be hard-pressed to see somebody top that. I went into this show expecting a few laughs and dry British wit, and now I'm talking to you about how great it is, and even got to speak with the people who made it, all because I took a chance one fateful evening. This has become one of my comfort shows, my happy place, if you will, and I hope more people rediscover it or see it for the first time. A newspaper called The Scotsman once described it as the finest Daftest animation series running. How you gonna argue that? So the next time someone says, "Oh, there's no good Canadian adult cartoons out there," you have Bob and Margaret to shut them down and shut them up.
I thought we said we'd never have any secrets from each other.
Did we say that?
I don't know, I think so.
If she's a real friend, she won't expect you to be perfect. I mean, I love you, and I have no expectations of you.
Come into bed and let me give you a squeeze.
You are such a dark horse, eh? Still full of surprises.
Night, Bob.
Good night.
Thanks for giving this video a watch, everybody. I really do appreciate it. So if you enjoyed yourself, feel free to give this video a like, share with a friend, subscribe, check out all my socials, my Patreon page, blah, 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 blah. All that stuff I always ramble on about at the end. If you have any memories of Bob and Margaret that you'd like to share, feel free to do so in the comments below. I'd personally love to read them. I'd also like to give a very special thanks to David Fine and Alison Snowden for their insight and helping to make this video what it was. You guys are very lovely people, you know that? I'm sure you do. And with all that said, I'll see you guys next time. Later!